New York City, 1794. A grand ballroom echoes with the laughter of the upper elite. The Revolutionary War has ended, and a new aristocracy of wealth rules the cobblestone streets of Manhattan. In this world of rustling silk and endless banquets, a 19-year-old woman seems to have won the ultimate lottery of life. She is the daughter of the city's most prominent physician. She has just married the handsome heir to a massive shipping empire. She possesses fortune, status, youth, and breathtaking beauty. The world tells her she has absolutely everything. And yet, in the quiet of her heart, she feels an invisible hunger that no amount of gold can satisfy. America, the dawn of the 19th century. Scientific progress and the industrial boom proclaim that man is the master of his own destiny. In the grand estates of Wall Street, the elite teach that suffering is merely a failure, a disease meant only for the lower classes. And in this society that worships prosperity and comfort, a wealthy heiress named Elizabeth Ann Seton is about to become one of the most astonishing stories of radical transformation in Christian history. Not because she sought poverty or rejection, but because God chooses the most comfortable, secure lives to shatter our fragile illusions of control. Elizabeth will not lead armies or write complex theological treatises. Her legacy will be a heart completely broken by loss, a reputation dragged through the mud by her own aristocratic family, and an empire of faith built entirely upon the ashes of her immense fortune. But that legacy will be enough for skeptics and believers across centuries to keep debating what truly happened when she lost it all. Because what Elizabeth lived through does not admit easy explanations. It only admits one terrifying question. What would you do if God asked you to walk away from millions to embrace a cross? Elizabeth Bailey comes into the world on August 28, 1774, into the highest tiers of New York society. Her father, Dr. Richard Bailey, is a brilliant surgeon and a man of science. Elizabeth is born a small girl with a sharp mind and a singular inclination toward the things of the soul. But the luminous childhood shatters soon. When she is only 3 years old, her mother dies. A stepmother enters the home, bringing coldness, distance, and eventual rejection. Elizabeth, essentially an emotional orphan trapped inside a mansion, discovers early on that all the wealth in the world cannot buy a mother's embrace. She spends hours alone by the ocean, watching the waves, searching for a love that doesn't perish. She writes in her journals of an agonizing isolation. She does not yet know that God is stripping away her earthly comforts, preparing her for a destiny that will require the sacrifice of absolutely everything she holds dear. At 19, Elizabeth believes she has found the anchor her lonely soul desperately sought. She marries William McGee Seton, a wealthy merchant with a gentle heart. For a brief, shining moment, the world is perfect. They move into a magnificent home on State Street. They have 5 beautiful children. Elizabeth becomes a prominent socialite, organizing charities, dancing at elite balls, and seemingly living a fairy tale. But the illusion of earthly security is incredibly fragile. God does not allow His chosen instruments to remain comfortable in a world that is passing away. The turn of the century brings a devastating storm. Political turmoil overseas and losing ships at sea plunge the Seton Empire into sudden, catastrophic bankruptcy. The fortune that had protected Elizabeth her entire life evaporates into thin air. Creditors knock on the door of the grand mansion. The aristocratic friends who once drank their wine suddenly look the other way. Elizabeth, who had never known the sting of poverty, must now watch her children's inheritance vanish. But financial ruin is merely the prelude to a much darker agony. The true thief comes not for their gold, but for their breath. William, the husband she loves with a fierce, protective devotion, begins to cough. It is a dry, relentless sound that echoes through the empty halls of their fading estate. Tuberculosis, the white plague that devours the lungs of the rich and the poor alike, has claimed him. The doctors of New York, the very colleagues of Elizabeth's late father, stand powerless. They offer only one desperate final prescription: a sea voyage to the warmer climate of Italy. It is a gamble born of absolute desperation. Elizabeth packs their meager remaining belongings, takes her eldest daughter Anna, and boards a ship with her dying husband. She leaves her 4 youngest children behind in America, tearing her own heart in two. The voyage across the Atlantic is a nightmare of violent storms and agonizing seasickness. Yet, Elizabeth does not break. In the damp, dark cabin of the rocking ship, she holds William's trembling hands. She writes in her journal, clinging to a profound, mysterious trust in a God who is systematically stripping away everything she loves. She does not yet know that Italy will not be a place of healing for William's body, but the terrifying crucible where her own soul will catch fire. The shores of Italy finally appear on the horizon, but they do not bring the salvation Elizabeth had prayed for. When the ship docks in Livorno, the authorities take one look at William's pale, sweat-drenched face and the ominous cough rattling in his chest. Fearing a plague, they order the family immediately into the lazaretto, a cold, damp quarantine fortress built of unforgiving stone. Instead of the warm Italian sun and healing air, Elizabeth finds herself locked in a literal purgatory. The wind howls through the unglazed windows, and the damp chill settles deep into William's shattered lungs. For nearly a month, Elizabeth serves as a desperate nurse in this makeshift prison. She watches the man she loves cough up his life onto the cold floor, his body wasting away before her very eyes. And then, the final devastating blow lands. Shortly after they are finally released from quarantine, William's fragile heart gives out. He dies, leaving Elizabeth completely alone in a foreign land. She is 29 years old, a widow, bankrupt, stranded thousands of miles from her home, with 4 children waiting across a massive ocean and one weeping daughter clinging to her skirts. By every human metric, her life is a tragedy of epic proportions. The gilded cage of New York feels like a distant, cruel hallucination. She has hit absolute rock bottom. But in the spiritual life, rock bottom is often the exact foundation God requires to build a miracle. In the wake of this crushing loss, William's Italian business partners, the Felici family, take the grieving widow into their home. Antonio and Filippo Felici are not just wealthy merchants, they are profoundly devout Catholics. For Elizabeth, raised in the strict, restrained traditions of the Protestant elite in America, the Catholic Church is a foreign, heavily stigmatized, almost forbidden territory. Yet, as she wanders through the ornate churches of Florence and Livorno, wrapped in the heavy black fabric of her mourning clothes, an unfamiliar warmth begins to stir within her frozen heart. She is captivated not by the Renaissance art or the towering architecture, but by the overwhelming, undeniable presence she feels near the altar. One afternoon, looking down from a balcony, she witnesses a Eucharistic procession moving through the cobblestone streets. She watches as ordinary men, wealthy merchants, and ragged beggars alike drop to their knees in the dirt as the priest passes with the consecrated host. An English tourist beside her mocks the display as primitive superstition, But Elizabeth suddenly bursts into tears. A terrifying, electrifying thought pierces her soul. What if it is true? What if God is truly there, physically present in the bread? The invisible hunger that had haunted her in the grand ballrooms of Wall Street violently awakens. She realizes, with a shock that shakes her to her core, that the eternal love she has been searching for her entire life is waiting for her in the Catholic tabernacle. The voyage back across the dark Atlantic is vastly different from her departure. Elizabeth returns to the shores of New York no longer just a grieving widow, but a woman harboring a dangerous, burning secret. High society expects her to quietly assume the role of the tragic, destitute aristocrat, relying on their measured charity. They expect her to sit obediently in the prestigious pews of Trinity Church. But Elizabeth's soul has been irrevocably ruined for the comfortable, sanitized religion of her youth. She cannot unsee the living God she encountered in the cobblestone streets of Italy. When the rumors begin to circulate that the widow Seton is reading Catholic theology and praying the rosary, the pity of the New York elite instantly curdles into sheer hostility. In the early 19th century, Catholicism in America is violently despised by the upper class. It is considered a primitive, superstitious cult meant only for poor immigrants, an absolute disgrace to the prestigious Bailey and Seton bloodlines. The whispers behind her back turn into cold, piercing stares. Then, the brutal ultimatums arrive. Her spiritual mentor and dearest friend, the powerful Reverend John Henry Hobart, draws a definitive line in the sand. If she joins the Catholic Church, she will be utterly severed from her family, her friends, and her heritage. For a widowed mother of 5 fatherless children with a bankrupt estate, this is not merely social suicide. It is a threat of literal starvation. The psychological agony is unbearable. Elizabeth spends entire nights weeping on the wooden floor of her rented room. Her maternal instincts scream at her to compromise, to protect her children's future and secure their meals, while her soul begs her to follow the undeniable truth she has found. She writes of being plunged into a terrifying darkness, feeling as though she is being asked to step off a cliff into an absolute abyss. But God demands everything. On Ash Wednesday, Elizabeth makes the unthinkable choice. Defying the wealthiest and most powerful families in the city, she walks through the heavy wooden doors of St. Peter's Church, the only Catholic parish in New York, and makes her profession of faith. The retaliation is swift, brutal, and complete. The doors of high society slam shut forever. Lifelong friends cross the street just to avoid making eye contact with her. Financial lifelines from her relatives are abruptly and viciously cut. She is left entirely penniless, an absolute outcast in the very city her family helped build. Yet, as she receives her first Holy Communion, tears streaming down her pale face, the terrifying abyss beneath her feet transforms into solid rock. The invisible hunger is finally gone. She has lost the entire world, but she has found her king. New York City is no longer home. It has become a suffocating prison of silence and piercing, disdainful stares. Elizabeth, the woman who was once the glowing centerpiece of Wall Street's most glittering galas, now desperately struggles simply to feed her 5 fatherless children. She attempts to open a small boarding school to survive, but the moment the aristocratic parents discover her Catholic faith, they immediately withdraw their daughters. The social boycott is ruthless, cold, and absolute. The final door to survival seems permanently welded shut. But in the divine architecture of grace, when the world strips away every last earthly support, that is precisely when God begins to build. Right at the precipice of total despair and the encroaching terror of starvation, a fragile lifeline appears. Father William Dubourg, a visiting priest from the distant frontier of Maryland, hears the whispered tales of the outcast widow's ironclad faith. When he looks into Elizabeth's weary eyes, he does not see a shattered victim of high society tragedy. He sees a blazing fire capable of illuminating an entire continent. He makes an offer that will alter the machinery of American history. Leave New York forever, bring her children to Baltimore, and establish a school for Catholic girls. It is a terrifying leap into the absolute unknown. To leave New York means permanently severing any lingering hope of rescue from her aristocratic family, turning her back on her entire ancestral legacy. But Elizabeth no longer belongs to that world. She gathers her meager, surviving possessions, takes the hands of her children, and boards a carriage heading south. As the wooden wheels rattle away from the familiar cobblestone streets of Manhattan, Elizabeth does not shed a single tear for the past. She is stepping into the wilderness, carrying a tiny seed that will soon grow into an empire of charity. In Baltimore, a new chapter opens in grueling, bone-chilling poverty. Gone are the rustling silks, the imported crystal goblets, and the roaring fireplaces. Elizabeth clothes herself in a coarse, simple black dress, forever leaving the image of the wealthy socialite in the ashes of history. In a cramped, drafty brick house, her first classroom is born. There are no massive endowment funds, no aristocratic patrons to shield her. Yet inside that impoverished room, a supernatural energy begins to flow. The maternal love of this woman who lost everything strikes the absolute core of her young students' hearts. And then, the true miracle unfolds. Other young women, drawn inexplicably by the radiant, burning faith of the widow Seton, begin to arrive at her doorstep. They are not seeking wealth, husbands, or social prestige. They are seeking the exact same eternal purpose Elizabeth found in that quiet Italian chapel. The agonizing, solitary pain of one broken woman is quietly birthing a revolution. The small brick house in Baltimore quickly becomes too confined for the blazing fire of this new vocation. Elizabeth and her growing band of followers are soon called to move to the remote, wild frontier of Emmitsburg, Maryland. Here, nestled in the rugged, forested landscape of St. Joseph's Valley, they officially establish the Sisters of Charity, the very first congregation of religious sisters founded in the United States. The wealthy New York socialite is now forever transformed into Mother Seton. But the romantic ideal of frontier ministry clashes brutally with the freezing reality of utter poverty. Their first winter in the infamous stone house is a grueling test of physical and spiritual endurance. The icy wind howls through the cracks in the rough walls. Snow drifts across the bare wooden floorboards, and their daily meals often consist of nothing more than carrot soup and stale bread. Yet, observers note something utterly bewildering. As their bodies shiver and starve, their spirits radiate an incandescent, unshakable joy. Elizabeth has discovered the profound secret of the saints. That true, indestructible freedom is found only when you have absolutely nothing left to lose. But the terrifying crucible of her sanctification is not yet finished. God demands an even heavier toll, piercing the deepest, most vulnerable sanctuary of Elizabeth's heart, her children. The same white plague that devoured her husband in the damp Italian quarantine now shadows her into the Maryland wilderness. Tuberculosis begins to ravage the fragile lungs of her beloved daughters. Anna Maria, her eldest, the one who had stood weeping by her father's deathbed in the lazaretto, falls terminally ill. As Mother Seton builds a haven for the orphaned and illiterate children of America, She is forced to endure the absolute nightmare of watching her own flesh and blood slowly suffocate. It is a psychological agony that would shatter the mind of any ordinary mother. She must walk the agonizing, razor-thin line between fiercely loving her daughter and surrendering her completely to the divine will. She spends her days nursing the sick of the valley and her nights holding her dying child, whispering promises of eternity as Anna Maria's breathing finally fades into silence. Shortly after Anna Maria's death, the plague returns with terrifying precision for her youngest daughter, Rebecca. Once again, Elizabeth sits by the deathbed, a silent, bleeding martyr of maternal grief. The secular world would look at this staggering accumulation of tragedy, the loss of her immense fortune, her beloved husband, her pristine reputation, and now her children, and conclude that her life is a horrific curse. But Elizabeth sees through the dark veil of physical suffering. She writes in her journals not with the ink of despair, but with the profound ground of absolute surrender. She teaches her young sisters that the cross is not a punishment, but a royal seal of God's most intimate, agonizing love. Every bitter tear shed in the frigid valley of Emmitsburg is quietly becoming a cornerstone for the sprawling network of Catholic schools, orphanages, and hospitals that will soon cover the American continent. She is no longer just the grieving mother of a shattered family. She is being forged into the spiritual mother of an entire nation. The rugged valley of Emmitsburg, once a place of freezing isolation and unimaginable grief, begins to undergo a miraculous transformation. The silent tears of a grieving widow have watered the seeds of an unprecedented spiritual revolution. From the rustic, drafty confines of the stone house, the Sisters of Charity begin to multiply. They are not merely a group of pious women retreating from the world. They are a formidable army of maternal love, deployed directly into the darkest, most neglected corners of a rapidly expanding American nation. They open free schools for the destitute, orphanages for the abandoned, and eventually hospitals for the dying. Elizabeth Seton, the outcast heiress who was ruthlessly denied a place at the tables of New York's elite, is now feeding the minds and souls of an entire generation. But this explosive, historical growth is not fueled by massive endowments, political favors, or societal approval. It is fueled by an agonizing, daily dying to self. Elizabeth carries the crushing weight of leadership, managing the grueling logistics and financial terrors of her growing religious community, all while her own physical body begins to fail. The White Plague, the very disease that mercilessly decimated her family, now begins its slow, methodical assault on her own lungs. Yet, her letters and journals from this period reveal an astonishing psychological triumph. There is absolutely no bitterness, no lingering regret for the millions of dollars she walked away from on Wall Street. Instead, there is a burning, almost reckless desire to be entirely consumed by the will of God. She implements a totally revolutionary approach to education. In a 19th century era where schooling is an exclusive, fiercely guarded privilege reserved strictly for the wealthy, Elizabeth throws the wooden doors open to the absolute poorest of the poor. She trains her sisters to look into the dirt-smudged, tear-stained faces of orphaned girls and see the very image of Christ crucified. Without realizing the historical magnitude of her obedience, she is single-handedly laying the indestructible bedrock for the entire Catholic parochial school system in the United States. And then, the ultimate divine paradox unfolds. The aristocratic elite of New York, the very people who once mocked her conversion as a scandalous act of madness and drove her out of their city in disgrace, are forced to watch in silent awe. Her spiritual empire expands rapidly beyond the borders of Maryland, reaching into Philadelphia and eventually marching right back into New York. The city that had stripped her of her wealth and banished her to starve will soon be begging for her Sisters of Charity to come and manage its overflowing orphanages. The woman who lost absolutely everything has become the mother who provides for all. As the harsh Maryland winter of 1820 descends upon the valley, the White Plague finally comes to claim its ultimate prize. Tuberculosis, the relentless predator that had already taken her husband and her two beloved daughters, now takes complete possession of Elizabeth's exhausted body. The woman who had single-handedly built an empire of charity from absolute nothingness is now confined to a small, austere room in the stone house. Her lungs are essentially destroyed, transformed into scarred, necrotic tissue that makes every single breath a Herculean battle. The doctors who occasionally visit her from the city stand utterly bewildered. By all known medical science, she should have succumbed to the disease months ago. They cannot comprehend that she is no longer surviving on oxygen, but on an indestructible supernatural will to suffer alongside the crucified Christ. This physical confinement is the final, most terrifying stripping of her soul. For a fiercely independent, pioneering woman who had traversed oceans, defied high society, and built a vast network of schools, to be reduced to absolute physical helplessness is a profound psychological agony. She can no longer walk the wooden halls of her orphanage. She can no longer stand before her classroom of destitute girls. Her world has violently shrunk to the dimensions of a simple wooden bed. Yet, the sisters who keep vigil beside her do not witness a woman defeated by tragedy. They witness a mystic who has transformed her sickbed into the highest, most powerful pulpit of her entire life. From this agonizing confinement, Mother Seton continues to govern her expanding spiritual empire. She dictates letters that carry the theological weight of a seasoned bishop, dripping with a profound, terrifying clarity about the nature of redemptive suffering. She teaches her spiritual daughters that the greatest work they will ever do is not found in teaching, building, or organizing, but in the silent, agonizing moments of total surrender to God's will. She is no longer just teaching them how to live. She is teaching them how to die. The small room becomes a sanctuary of divine paradox. While her body wastes away into a skeletal frame, her spirit expands with a luminous, blinding serenity. When her sisters weep at the foot of her bed, terrified of losing their spiritual mother and the foundation of their order, Elizabeth looks at them with eyes that have already seen beyond the veil of this world. She does not offer them false comfort or empty platitudes about a miraculous recovery. Instead, she points them directly to the cross, demanding that they embrace the very suffering that is currently tearing her apart. The wealthy New York heiress has finally been emptied of absolutely everything earthly, and in that terrifying emptiness, she has become a pure, unblemished vessel of God. The winter of the soul has arrived at the stone house in Emmitsburg. The air inside the small, austere room is thin and frigid, smelling of beeswax and the metallic tang of sickness. Elizabeth Ann Seton, the woman who once commanded the attention of New York's most prestigious ballrooms, is now a shadow of bone and spirit. The tuberculosis has finally reached its terminal stage, turning every attempt at speech into a violent, racking struggle for air. Those gathered around her bed, the sisters who have become her spiritual daughters, and the few surviving members of her family, witness a scene that defies human logic. There is no panic in her eyes, no desperate clutching at a life that was so filled with both extraordinary wealth and crushing tragedy. Instead, there is the terrifyingly beautiful stillness of a soldier who has finished the war. As the final hours approach, the psychological intensity in the room becomes almost palpable. Elizabeth knows she is leaving behind a fragile infant congregation in a country that still harbors deep-seated hatred for her faith. The weight of an entire nation's spiritual future rests on the shoulders of the women she has trained. With her last remaining strength, she pulls her sisters close. Her voice, once clear and commanding in the salons of Manhattan, is now a ghostly whisper, yet it carries the force of a divine decree. She does not give them complex instructions on administration or finance. She does not speak of the massive schools they will one day build. She gives them only one command, the secret to everything she has accomplished. Be children of the church. Be children of the church. It is the final testament of a woman who traded a fortune for a father and an inheritance for an eternal home. The transition is not one of violence, but of profound, radiant surrender. At the very moment when the physical lungs can no longer draw the cold Maryland air, a strange, supernatural peace descends upon the room. The agony that had contorted her face for months simply evaporates. Those present describe a luminous transformation, as if the light of the eternal morning had already begun to break through the veil of her skin. The heiress who walked away from millions, the widow who wept over her husband in an Italian prison, the mother who buried her children in the wilderness, finally closes her eyes. It is the end of a long, bloodless martyrdom. In the absolute silence of that room, the world loses a bankrupt widow, but heaven gains a queen. The sacrifice that began in the grand estates of Wall Street is finally, perfectly consummated. The silence that fell over the stone house on that cold January morning did not signal an end, but a massive, invisible explosion of grace. The woman who died in a small, rented room, stripped of every cent of her ancestral fortune, had unknowingly planted a forest that would soon shade an entire nation. The Sisters of Charity, the small band of women who shared her carrot soup and freezing floors, did not scatter in grief. Instead, fueled by the ironclad spirit of their mother, they began a relentless march across the American map. From the crowded tenements of New York to the dusty frontier somos of the West, they brought with them the two things Elizabeth valued most: the healing of the body and the enlightenment of the soul. Every Catholic hospital that stands today, every parochial school that educates a child, and every orphanage that shelters the abandoned in this land carries the invisible DNA of the bankrupt widow from Wall Street. She did not just build buildings, she built a new way of being American, one that defined success not by the accumulation of wealth, but by the radicality of sacrifice. The world tried to forget the scandalous heiress, but the Church could not. In a historic moment on September 14, 1975, the bells of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome rang out for a daughter of New York. Pope Paul VI solemnly declared Elizabeth Ann Seton a saint, the very first native-born citizen of the United States to be raised to the altars. The irony was complete. The woman who was once a social outcast, mocked by the elite of her day, was now venerated by millions across the globe. Her incorrupt legacy proved a terrifying truth to the modern world: that a life completely surrendered to God is more powerful than any shipping empire or financial dynasty. The wealth she walked away from in 1805 has long since turned to dust, but the spiritual empire she founded continues to save lives and souls 2 centuries later. Her life stands today as a haunting cinematic mirror for every one of us. Elizabeth Seton's story asks the question we are all afraid to answer. What are you clinging to that is keeping you from your true destiny? We spend our lives building gilded cages of comfort, terrified of the very ruin that might actually set us free. Elizabeth's journey proves that God often shatters our earthly mirrors so that we can finally see His face. Her silent question crosses the centuries and reaches you today, in the midst of your own struggles, your own losses, and your own fears. Are you willing to lose the world to find your soul? Are you brave enough to walk through the ruins of your life to find the God who is waiting there? Elizabeth Ann Seton, the heiress who found the only treasure that matters, reminds us that the greatest fortune is not what we hold in our hands, but what we give away with our hearts. Saint Elizabeth Ann Seton, Mother of a nation and flower of the wilderness, pray for us.